ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ የናሽናል ኤርዌይስ እህት ኩባንያ ጥራት ባለው ስልጠና ልዩነት መፍጠር ዋናው ዓላማው ነው። ከከፍተኛ ትምህርት አግባብነትና ጥራት ኤጀንሲ ሙሉ ዕውቅና ባገኘንባቸው በማስተርስ ፕሮግራም ኤምቢኤ በስትራቴጂክ ማኔጅመንት፣ ኤምቢኤ በቢዝነስ ሊደርሺፕ፣ ኤምቢኤ በሪስክና ኢንሹራንስ፣ ኤምቢኤ በባንኪንግና ፋይናንስ፣ ኤምኤስሲ በኢንተርናሽናል ትሬድና ኢኮኖሚክስ፣ ኤምኤ በሆስፒታሊቲ ማኔጅመንት፣ ኤምኤ በሎጂስቲክስና ሰፕላይ ቼን ማኔጅመንት፣ ኤምኤስሲ በአቪዬሽን ማኔጅመንት ተማሪዎቻችን በልዩነት ይማራሉ። በኬንያ ሀገር ከሚገኙ ስመጥር ዩኒቨርሲቲዎች በመጡ ፕሮፌሰሮች ስልጠናው ይሰጣል። ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ በዲግሪ ፕሮግራም በአቪዬሽን ማኔጅመንት፣ በአካውንቲንግና ፋይናንስ፣ በማርኬቲንግ ማኔጅመንት፣ በሆቴል ማኔጅመንት በምዝገባ ላይ ነን። በአጫጭር ኮርሶችም በፍላይት ኦፕሬሽን፣ በቲኬቲንግና ሪዘርቬሽን፣ በሆስቴስ፣ በሆስፒታሊቲ ማኔጅመንት እናሰለጥናለን። አድራሻ ከ22 አደባባይ ወደ ሾላ በሚወስደው መንገድ ላይ ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ የናሽናል ኤርዌይስ እህት ኩባንያ ህልሞን እውን ያደርጋል።
So our today class will be regarding the wine production, or how to make table wine. In the past classes, we try to see the different definitions, at the same time history of wine and lots of other topics. And for now, we will see in details how we make a table wine. Why we give much more emphasis on the preparation of table wine. The others are more simple, and we will try to see some points related to those points as well. So we will try to see the wine production process. As you can see, this is Zinfandel. Zinfandel is a red wine grape. This is called vineyard. A wine farm is called vineyard. So when we come to our point related to making process, the first step will be harvesting. When you say harvesting, every time the grape should have to be plucked when the density of the bloom, or when the natural yeast on the skin takes from the bunches in constant, or when the grape is ripen and when it has nothing more to gain from the plant, which is sugar, it will be harvested. Mostly, it is better to harvest the grape during the dry weather season. It's more preferable. It will be easy to harvest those items. So the first step will be harvesting. Harvesting is the most important and crucial part during the preparation of wine, because it's called vintage when the aging of the grape is started when we are harvesting the grape from the plant. So the first step is harvesting, taking the grape from the tree. The second one, grading. When we say grading, the second step is grading. After we harvest the grape, we will grade them according to its quality. As we know, different grape has different quality, depending on the weather type, depending on the water amount they take, depending on the soil, and lots of other reasons. They have different quality. So we will grade them accordingly. The grape. The third step is waiting. Why we need to wait the grape? Because in order to identify, or in order to determine how much quantity is required for the fermentation process. You might have too much harvested grape, but all of them may not be fermented in one time. So in order to determine that, we need to wait the wine. So basically, we need to do this process. And as I said, the harvesting of the wine, with what we call it vintage, It's being one of the most crucial steps in the winemaking process. As I mentioned earlier, the harvesting of the wine, or when you harvest the wine from the tree or from the plant, it's called vintage. So most of the time we see the age in the label, like it might say 2050, 2012, or something like that. That's called vintage date. That doesn't mean the wine is bottled or prepared on that specific year. Rather, it represents the vintage date is the date which the grape is harvested. So we have two types of harvesting system. As you can see, this is the manual. It uses intense labor use. So the first one is using manpower. The second one is mechanical harvesting. This is much more effective because it will reduce the manpower cost. At the same time, it will reduce the time which we spent during the harvesting, and it has multi-purpose as well. This is the grapes. So after we harvest, the next step will be removal of stalk. We have to remove the stalk. Why we need to remove? Because every time we need to plant off the ripe grapes from the stalk. Most of the time, or currently, we have a technology which is called destalking machine. And why we remove the stalk? Because it has a bitter taste. The stalk has a bitter taste. Why? Due to the presence of large amount of tannin. As we all said in the last class, tannin might be present in the stalk, in the pulp, in the seed, almost in every part of the grape. We have tannin. So the tannin which we need, mostly we are using from the skin. At the same time, we might use from the pulp. So the tannin which is present in the talc, it has bitter taste, so we didn't use that thing. So we have to prevent it from to contact to the juice, so that the stalk should have to be removed. This is destalking machines. It will circle around the machine, so it will destalk the stalk from the grape by itself. So this is the mechanical method. And the next step will be crushing and pressing. When we say crushing and pressing, this is taking place depending on the oenologist who is specialized in the winemaking process, and it is optional procedure. We might do it, or we might also perform it later. So it's an optional procedure whether the grape is crushed just before barreling for the fermentation in order to release the contents of the berries. That sometimes we might use in the latter procedure. So during the crushing, or when grapes are crushed, some regions they might use their feet to crush, and more conventionally they use the mechanical process to extract the juice. Why we crush the grape? In order to release, in order to extract the juice from the grape. So the gain or the yield part of the juice of the grape is called must. It's called must. So at this stage, the winemaker use hydrometer. In order, they use this hydrometer in order to measure the specific gravity of the must, which is the juice of the grape, in order to indicate that the sugar content and also that the alcoholic strength of the wine. So it will measure the sugar content of the grape, at the same time the alcoholic strength of the wine. So this may allow the winemakers to add small quantity of sugar. For example, some grapes, they may not have enough content of sugar in order to produce enough alcohol and carbon dioxide. So that we might add small amount of sugar for insufficient alcoholic potential. This process of enrichment is called capitalization. When we add sugar in the form of artificial method, when the wine or when the grape lacks the enough concentration of sugar, we add in artificial form. That process is called capitalization. This is crushing. So the vinification process of rosé wine, the juice of rosé wine takes in the fermentation vat like pink color, and we have to take it immediately from the tanker in order to not to run to the red wine. Once we get the rose color, we have to remove from the tanker and we need to take it to another vat. So normally it allows to finish the fermentation naturally, and this is completely dry in the case of rosé wine. In the vinification of white wine, it might be either white or red grapes. They might be added to the crushed steamer, and in this time the skin is separated immediately because we need what white wine, so that we will not need the skin of especially the red grape. But what makes differ red wine, the skin of the red grape will be allowed in order to contact with the juice, because in order to get the red color, as we discussed earlier, red wine gets its color from the skin. So in every process or till the end of the process, the skin of the grape is allowed to run all with the juice. And in the case of rosé wine, as we said, it's made by allowing the skin of the red grape to come into contact with for a shorter period of time until it gives us or until it drives rosé. Then, while the juice to get the drier pink colors, we have to remove it, the juice of the grape, and we need to transfer to another vessels in order to keep that color. And after that process, there is a process which is called sulfuring. When we say sulfuring, we have to add sulfur dioxide in the earlier of fermentation process. Why we add sulfur dioxide? Mostly it helps or it will prevent the airflow, oxidizing the juice and converting the alcohol into vinegar. So in order to prevent from converting the juice into vinegar at the same time from the oxidization of the juice, we will add sulfur dioxide. So sulfur dioxide, it will being hungry for oxygen. So it will take up the oxygen from the mest or from the juice of the grape to let the wine yeast in the anaerobic, which is it will be able to work in the absence of oxygen, the yeast. So the yeast, it will convert the grape into sugar, into alcohol and carbon dioxide. So the sulfur dioxide, it also forms a coating on the surface of the juice. Why? In order to prevent the air from entering the juice. Thereby, it will let the wine yeast to do its work. So unless we add sulfur dioxide, the wine will be changed into vinegar. So it has a bitter taste, not the taste which we demand. So that we add sulfur dioxide. So it will prevent in that way. So after that, we will make fermentation process. We will make a fermentation process. As we all know, fermentation is the process of converting sugar, which is already have in the grape, into alcohol and carbon dioxide, and the alcohol is called ethyl alcohol. So in order to perform this process, we need to have yeast. Yeast is the agent which helps to convert the alcohol, the sugar, into alcohol and carbon dioxide. So in this process, the carbon dioxide by itself released for making fermentation violent as first and then slow. So the yeast added is 3 to 5% of the volume of the juice. So the amount of yeast, it's depending on the amount of the juice, the volume of the juice we add on the fermentation tank. Then, as we all know, the fermentation process, it might take from 2 days up to 2 weeks, according to the tradition of the house. Mostly, it might take from a week to 2 weeks, so that we have to give much more emphasis on the fermentation process. So it differs from a company to other company, or a winery from other winery, the number of days which the fermentation takes place. So during the fermentation process, the desired amount of temperature should have to be maintained between 64 and 77 degree Fahrenheit, and the winemaker may control the acidity by adding water. It's not recommendable to add water, but sometimes if it is too acidic, and we might add water, and sometimes we may not use water, but we can use acidifying agents such as gypsums can be used in order to maintain or balance the acidity. So in the fermentation practice, there are different materials or things which we use in order for fermentation process. The first one is stainless steel, which is the tanker. We use stainless steel. In the case of stainless steel, it will impart no extra flavor to the wine. It has no contribution, or it will not add any flavor to the wine. Why? Because it's stainless steel. We cannot gain anything from the stainless. And it helps, or it will preserve the intensity of the fruit. And also it will drive us the true varietal character, because it will not gain any extra flavor from the material, so that it will give us the true varietal character. And most wineries prefer the stainless steel. Why? Because it's least expensive method. It's the cheapest one when we compare with the barrel one. The second one, barrel fermentation. Mostly we use barrel fermentation for white wines. When we use barrel fermentation, it has its own advantage. The first one, it will add flavor of butterscotch, toast, vanilla in the white wine. And most of the time, the French oaks are more desirable, because they will have a subtle influence. When you compare the cost, even the French oak is much expensive. The average price for the French oak is 650 USD, and for the American oak, it's 100. You can see the difference even with the price. And sometimes they might use combination, which is partial barrel, partial stainless steel. Some winery, they might use partial method. Partial barrel, partial stainless steel. And all new oak or partial new oak. Oak might be different based on their age. There is 1 year old, 2 years old oak might be used, and when the age of the oak increase, the price will be decreased because it's considered as not annual. The new one will be expensive, but after you produce 2 or 3, you can solve the oak bar, so the price will be much lower. And the fourth method, there is second fermentation. It's called malolactic. Malolactic or second fermentation is used in order to produce non-alcoholic fermentation, or in order to process non-alcoholic fermentation. Why? Because it will convert, when we process the second fermentation, it will convert the harsh maltic acid, which happens, to soft lactic acid into milk. And it will add a creamy, rich mouthfeel to the wine, and it's identifiable in the wine as a texture. You can easily identify. So that we use second fermentation in order to produce non-alcoholic fermentation, or in order to then non-alcoholic wines. As you can see, those are the pictures. This is the stainless steel tanker, and this is the oak bear. We will see in the next point. The other one, cellaring and second pressing. The first pressing is in order to release the juice of the grape. And now we will see the second pressing. Cellaring and second pressing. Once fermentation is complete, once we do the fermentation process, the remaining wine is run off into cask for maturity. In order to mature, it will move to the cask. And every time the cask should have to fill to full. Why? In order to exclude air, because if it has air, as we said, it will oxidize and the wine will be changed or converted into vinegar. So in order to avoid, we have to fill to the full. So the filled casks are put in the cellars for the wine to mature, and this process is called cellar. When we fill the cask and put in the cellar for the wine to mature, its process is called cellaring. The secondary juice called wind press. Mostly it's rich in tannin. Mostly we may not need the leftover of the tannin, but the pipes and the skin are sent for the second and third pressing. During this time, we will assure that nothing is left. So we will avoid the wastage, and the sugar in the grape is completely utilized. So this is called wind press. The other step, clarification. In the case of clarification, mostly the winemakers using this process of adding a substance that bond to the particle in the wine, and then sink to the bottom of the containers to remove them before bottling. When we thrill, we can clarify the substances which or the particles which is inside the wine. And racking. This process is the wine must separated from the dead yeast. In the tanker, once the fermentation process is completed, we have a dead yeast inside there. In the cellar cask, we have a dead yeast. So, if you are bottling them, the dead yeast will affect the taste of the wine, or it will give us odd flavor. So, the wine should have to be separated from the dead yeast, which decompose and give an odd flavor to the wine. those dead yeast, as I said, they will settle at the bottom of the cask. So the wine should have to be carefully pumped into another cask without disturbing the dead yeast, so that the dead yeast will live in that cask. So the wine or the juice of the wine or the mist, it will transfer to other cask. By doing that, we can prevent the taste, the flavor of the wine. So when you are transfer from one vessel or from one cask to another cask in order to separate the mist from the dead yeast, that process is called racking. That process is called racking. As you can see, this is the cask. It has different parts. And this is oak. As you can see, we are making the beer to age the wine using this oak. The other one, fining and filtration. Mainly this process, this is the process of converting the cloudy wine into a clear or fine wine. Mostly, this might be done with a gelatinous substance such as isinglass, which is bladder of sturgeon fish, or white of egg, which is egg shell, and other items. So we can settle or filter the wine using those things, and the wine may then be passed through the fine filter.
ለመማር ወደ ትምህርት ተቋም መሄድ ግድ አይደለም።
ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ
ራሳችሁን ከኮሮና ቫይረስ ወረርሽኝ እየጠበቃችሁ በቤታችሁ ወይም በተመቻችሁ ቦታ
በኢንተርኔት አማካኝነት በኦንላይን ትምህርታችሁን መከታተል ይቻላል።
ካናዳ ከሚገኘው ኢንተርናሽናል ኤር ትራንስፖርት አሶሲዬሽን አያታና
ከእንግሊዙ ኢንስቲትዩት ኦፍ ኮመርሻል ማኔጅመንት ICM ጋር በመተባበር የሚሰጡ ትምህርቶችን ተከታትላችሁ በ6 ወር ጊዜ በዓለም አቀፍ ደረጃ ተቀባይነት ያለውን የስልጠና ማስረጃ ባለቤት መሆን ይቻላል።
ከኢትዮጵያ ሲቪል አቪዬሽን ባለስልጣን ሙሉቅና ባገኘንባቸው የፍላይት ኦፕሬሽን እና የሆስተስ ስልጠናም በመዝገባ ላይ ነን።
ጥያቄና መልስ፣ የክፍል ስራዎች ብሎም ፈተና መፈተን ክፍል ውስጥ እንዳላችሁ አይነት
ልምድ ባላቸው መምህራን እየተማራችሁ
በኦንላይን ባላችሁበት ቦታ
አድራሻ ከ22 ማዞሪያ ወደ ሾላ ገበያ በሚወስደው መንገድ 150 ሜትር ገባ ብሎ ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ
የናሽናል ኤርዌይስ እህት ኩባንያ
ህልሞን እውን ያደርጋል።
The other one, refrigeration. When we say refrigeration, the young wine is pumped into refrigeration until it stabilizes the wine, until it settles. As we know, table wines are still wines, so they have to be stabilized. So that sometimes for young wines, we might add in the refrigerator. And the next step, blending. In the case of blending, or what's blending? When we are mixing wines that comes from different region, or that comes from different country, that comes from different aging, vintage. Why we blend? In order to produce the best or the finest wine, we might blend. But blending is the most difficult task or operation. But it is a very effective one for the correction and improvement of a particular feature in certain wines. So that it requires experience, it requires skill, it requires judgment and sensitivity. It's an art by itself, because we are mixing. So that we need to check the balance, we need to check the intensity, we need to check the taste, the flavor, the bouquet, the aroma, and lots of other things. So in order to do that, we need to have a considerable experience. We need to have a good judgment skills. And blending is legitimate and natural, and it is the honest way to improve the taste of or the quality of the wine. And mostly this is done before the blending, before the blended wine has lost its bouquet and fineness, quality, and color. The blending should have to done immediately. Blending, we have two types of blending. For example, blending wines from different grape varieties. We might blend from different variety. For example, we have Cabernet Sauvignon, so that we might blend Cabernet Sauvignon with Merlot. We might blend Cabernet Sauvignon with Cabernet Franc, with Petit Syrah, and with Malbec. And also we have Sauvignon Blanc with Semillon, and according to the SLO, it requires 75% to be labeled as a certain variety. The second, blending wines from different types of fermentation or aging from different types of fermentation or aging. For example, half grapes from stainless steel and half wines from the barrel, or 1/3 of from the new oak, 1/3 of from 1 year oak, 1/3 of from 2 years old, or something. And for this, it has no law. When we blend wines from different types of fermentation, we have no law. But when we blend wines from different grape variety, we have law. And the fact should have to be written on the label. If you are mixing Cabernet Sauvignon with Merlot, we need to add the fact. We use Cabernet Sauvignon 75% or 80 something percent, and we use Merlot this amount of percent. That's blended one. Appellation. In the case of appellation, the grapes grown in different climate yield different style of wine. As we know, as the grape grow in Zawai and as the grape grow in Awash, it yields different style of wine. It tastes different because of the climate. And 75% of the wine must come from designated appellation on the label. That's to come from the main district or the designated appellation on the label. And the more specific the info on the label, it's the better, and usually the more expensive the wine is. So that we will see on the label, there are lots of information which we need to write on the label. So all those facts should have to be written on that. All the facts should have to be written on that. The other one, bottling. When you come to bottling, wine to be bottled should be as clear as possible. The wine should have to be as clear as possible. And the bottle should have to be absolutely clean, because once you lose your market if it is not clean and reach to the customer, it might raise huge complaints. So it will avoid our brand image. So that we need to be more careful on the cleanness of the bottles. Due to that, most winery, they use different technology in order to clean their bottles. Most of the time, there is no human contact. It's operated using the machine. And the quality of the cork used is an important factor. The quality of the cork by itself. When you say the cork, it's cork which we bottled the wine. It's important factor. Sometimes it might be produced from plastic. Sometimes it might be produced from screw. Sometimes it might be produced from oak. So that, depending on the thing which you use, it has an effect on the taste of the wine by itself. So most of the time, the cork, which is prepared or made from the oak, they have a huge effect or a significant effect on the taste of the wine. And they are always to be of good quality. And we need to soak them for a day in cold water and drain them. Then before we use them, we need to dip them for a few months in the wine. So we have to avoid leaving too much airspace in the bottling between the wine and the cork. We need to avoid because they need to contact. That's why we have to put we need to make a contact between the juice or the wine with the corks. When they make a contact, they will process inside the bottle, so that it will affect the taste. It will not increase the alcoholic content of the wine, but it will affect the taste of the wine. When it's much older, it will be much tastier. When we say tastier, that doesn't taste sweet, rather it has more bitter taste, not sweet, or it has more bouquet than aroma. This is corking, or this is cork. This is bottling. In the case of bottling, the wine bottle are being filled with a cork. Also, as I said, there are alternative wine closures such as synthetic cork or screw caps, which are less subjected to cork taint. They are become popular, and the final step is adding a capsule to the top of the bottle. So this is the bottling stage. And pasteurization, it is a process to age the wine and free the wine from further fermentation. Once we make the pasteurization, we are preventing the wine from further fermentation. So the wine in bottle is dipped, descent in double boiler with water and heated to temperature between 180 and 190 degree Fahrenheit, and dipping is just for 1 or 2 minutes. And the other, aging. When we say aging, a wine should have to be aged in a bottle. The period of aging may differ from house to house, grape to grape, according to the winery. The aging time might be different. As an example, Bordeaux and Burgundy wines, they are aged for 3 up to 4 years. While Chablis, they might be aged for 18 months only. So depending on the wine and depending on the winery by itself, the aging might be different. Aging has its own huge factor. Aging can be done into 2 areas. The first one, in the oak bar, the wine in the oak bar, as you can see in this picture, in the oak bar, the wine will be aged in the oak bar, so that it will get the color, some color effect. It will get some taste effect from the wood, from the oak bark. So that mostly the oak bark wines are more expensive than those who aged in the stainless steel. The other one, reading a wine label. Mostly we have two labels, front label and back label. As we know, label is or labeling is an information which is written on the front or back packaging, or it gives an information regarding the wine and other things. So the label on the bottle of wine can give lots of information about the wine, and the language used will normally be that of a country of origin. Sometimes it depends on the origin of the country. The language they use might be different. For example, wines which is produced in France, their labeling will be French language. The wine which is produced in the Portuguese, they use their own language. The wine which is produced in Ethiopia, they use two languages, the English and the Amharic one. So mostly in the label, we can get those four information. In the label, we can get those four information. The first one, the country where the wine was made. For example, if you can see our wines like Awash Winery or Castle Winery, they write on the label the name Ethiopia. It indicates the country where the wine was made. For example, it says, if you see Rift Valley, it says Rift Valley, Ethiopia. So they have to indicate the country of the wine. The second one, alcoholic strength. It has to be indicated on the label. This percent, 11%, 12%. They should have to mention that. Even if they have to mention what? The strength, like, for example, is it sweet, medium sweet, or dry? There are wines which is dry, which might have an alcoholic content of like 30% alcoholic, 13% alcoholic percent per volume. There are medium sweet and there are sweet. That fact should have to be written on the label. The other one, the content in liter. 1 liter. 750 ml. Something like that. The content of the liter should have to be written. And the other, the name and address of trademark of the supplier should have to be written. For example, in the case of the name, in our country, it's a Awash Winery or it's a Castle Winery. And it will add what? Their producing area or their address of trademark of the supplier. For example, it is, or the Castle Winery is produced in the Oromian region around Zawai, something like that. It has to be written. All those information should have to be presented on the label of the wine. This is a sample. This is the front label. As you can see, it has detailed information. It has detailed information. For example, we can start from the Domaine du Bannier. This is the wine name by itself. As you can see, it says 2003. 2003 is what? The vintage date. 2003 is the vintage date. What's vintage? Vintage is the year when the grape is harvested. So this wine is harvested in 2003. It's called vintage. The other one, red Rhone wine. Red Rhone wine is generic area name. Generic area name for the wine. For the wine. This one, GFA du Domaine du Vineyard. This is state name, which the wine is produced. So, du Domaine du Vineyard. So that the wine is named after a place. As you can see, the state name is Domaine du Vineyard. The wine name by itself is Domaine du Vineyard. So that this wine is named after a place. The other one, appellation name. Appellation is Chateau de Pape. It represents the place as well. And this is restricted defined area. Appellation Chateau de Pape control. And this one is 750 ml. The net content, the net amount of the wine is 750 ml. And this is the alcoholic content, 40.5 by volume. This is the address, JC, Vidal, Ficro, something blah blah blah. This is the address, and this is certificate, certified bottled at the state seller. This is their certification. As you can see, this is the other, the type of the wine, the vintage, the name of the wine, the country, the alcoholic content, descriptive information, producer, appellation. So mostly the information which we get in the front label, they are similar. And we have also a back label which tells us details, information regarding the trademark, regarding the cautions, for example, drink responsibly, driving, don't drive drinking, or something, some kind of information might be gained in the back label. And it's not allowed to pregnant women to drink the wine. Some kind of information or labels can be written on the label. And tasting of wine. In the case of tasting of wine, the person who is specialized in the tasting of wine is called sommelier. Sommelier is a person who is specialized in tasting of wine. So the sommelier has extensive knowledge of the wine list. He knows by sniffing the cork regarding the taste without tasting it. So to be a sommelier, he should or she should have to have a good knowledge of the characteristics of different wines offered. So they need to identify. In our country, we know this thing by a coffee. There are a tester who taste coffee, and you can differentiate the quality of the coffee from one region to another. So those, based on their taste, they will grade the quality of the coffee, and a price will be set based upon that. The same to here. A sommelier will have a good knowledge regarding the characteristic of the wine taste, and to ensure he or she must know the correct approach to taste wine. Testing may be said to be analysis of wine by the sense. It's analysis by the sense. You can sense by your nose because you sniff. We will see that point as well. It's appreciation by our sense of the quality of a wine. Sight, it indicates the clarity in the color of wine. You will see the color, the clarity. By itself, you will identify. Smell, it will determine the bouquet of the wine. The smell, it will detect the bouquet. And when you taste, it allows you to detect the aroma in your mouth. So that tasting is analysis of wine by the sense. So the taste character of wine is dictated in different parts of the mouth, but especially by the tongue. For example, we can check the sweetness and dryness at the tip of our tongue. Is it sweet or dry? We taste this thing by the tip of our tongue. And we taste the acidity on the upper edge. On the upper edge of our mouth, we taste the acidity, and the saltiness at the side of our mouth. And the bitterness, we taste it at the back of our tongue. So, to appreciate the taste of the wine to the full, you must work in the correct environment. That is, no noise to distract the taste. No noise should have to distract the taste. The second, good ventilation to eliminate the odors. And we need to have sufficient light. Basically, it shouldn't have to be artificial, but daylight is possible or good in order to identify the clarity or the color of the wine. And ventilation in order to eliminate the other odors, because they might affect our sniffing. The other one, temperature of the room. It has to be about 20 degrees centigrade. So that with those conditions, we can make a good wine taste. With those things, we can make a good wine taste. And the taste includes looking at, which is the color, smelling, which is the bouquet, tasting, which is the aroma. So the wine glass, every time, it has to be the correct shape. We have to use the correct glassware, and it needs to be neat and clean. If it has some dust, or if it has some polishing materials, or when we polish the items or the glass, there may, if we use different kinds of clothes in order to clean the glass, there might be left some nibs, so that it will affect our sight. With the steam and of sufficient capacity should be chosen, and it must be fairly wide but narrowing at the tip of at the top, because it allows the element to make up the bouquet to become concentrated and thus better assessed. And also, it should never be filled to more than 1/3 capacity. Every time the wine should have to be filled 1/3 of the glass, because it allows the taster to swirl the wine around the glass more easily. because in order to release the aroma and the bouquet which is inside the grape. So that to make it easy the swirling, we need to use that thing. And the glass should be spotlessly clean. It has to be spotless. So wine tasting basically, as you can see in this, in your nose you will check the aroma and you will taste and you will touch related to the flavor, and it will have a psychological effect. And when you taste, you will see this is in the case of flavor. This is in the case of flavor, you will check the aroma. It has psychological tasting, it has taste and touch. And in the case of taste, you will check the acidity, the sweetness, the bitter, and the salt. So this is all about today. We will there is a wine tasting basics. So we will proceed on the next class. Thank you for your time.